Welcome to Advanced Insights. I'm Mark Papermaster, CTO and EVP at AMD, and I'm excited to continue this series where we provide just what the show name suggests, advanced insights into some of the most exciting trends and topics in the industry. On this episode, we explore how AI is fundamentally transforming content creation, how professionals and consumers are freed up to focus more on creativity and to really enable the generation of both images and video that they never thought was possible. I'm joined on the show today by Eli Greenfield. As a quick intro, Eli is the CTO of Adobe's digital media business. He oversees technology strategy and works with the Creative Cloud and Document Cloud leadership teams to leverage the latest waves of disruptive technologies. Most recently, Eli spearheaded the launch of Adobe Firefly, the company's first generative AI model designed to empower customers of all experience levels to generate high-quality images and stunning textual effects. Eli, it is great to have you on the show. I am looking forward to our conversation on how AI is fundamentally changing content creation.
Thanks, Mark. It's good to be here. Good to see you again, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. I talk about AI pretty much all day and all night, and enjoy it every time. So happy to dig in with you.
Well, let's get started. Exactly when we think about what you do and what you've been driving at Adobe, because Adobe has been focused on accelerating creativity. And as you said, I mean, AI is a part of every conversation. I'd love to kick off just with you expanding a little bit about what that means at Adobe, and where are we on this journey? I mean, it feels to me like we're just at an incredible inflection point.
I think, an inflection point is the right way to describe it. In some ways, this is an old story for Adobe, and in some ways, it's a really exciting new time. If you go back, I think it's like 40 years now to the dawn of Photoshop. We enabled digital creativity, digital content creation, but by today's standards, the tools back then were very crude. It was, the pencil tool and the brush tool. It was almost like the assembly language of creativity. And everything we've done over the past 40 years is about trying to raise the conversation between the human and the computer so that it's not the human having to speak the computer's language, but really the computer trying to understand the user's intent and understand what the creative wants to do and trying to accomplish that sort of on their behalf or assist them in it. And what we've seen in the past year or two with generative AI is this step function or inflection point in the computer's ability to really understand semantically what the user's trying to do. And the result of that is a huge improvement in the productivity of a creative, right? The computer can just help them move faster in their creative process, move them through their ideas, and just drive. More ideas means better results, means more creativity, more interesting content as a result. So it's been a big shift, and like you said, we're really, we're seeing real results and real value for creatives, but we're also just at the beginning of what is a pretty exciting transformation.
And so, it's interesting, like you said, you've been working on this for years. I'd love to get your perspective on why now. So, of course, it's generative AI. Everything sort of changed, after suddenly generative AI became, the fastest growing application in technology history. So it's clearly that, but, it's got to be more hurdles than that. So it's technical capabilities, but also you had to grapple with, I'm sure, a host of other barriers, like how do you use generative AI, but protect artist content that's involved in the learning. So, if we could just get some of your thoughts of what was behind this breakthrough and what were some of the impediments actually that you had to get over.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It is it's about the technology, obviously, but it's way more than that. And I spend as much time talking with our customers, with our internal design team, who are some of our most avid and vocal critics and boosters of the tools and the technology. With our lawyers, we have an internal AI ethics team. I spend time with them. So it's as much about those questions about how do we not only make the technology capable, but how do we get it in a form that is usable by our customers, right? When we started working with this new wave of generative AI, almost 2 years ago now, The question was not how do we make AI that can create content. It was how do we make AI that is usable by our customers, and that comes down a lot to, first of all, the legal issues. Right? Who owns the rights around this? Is it even legal? What is this stuff trained on? What does that mean for my content when I create things with this? These are all huge questions that every one of our customers was asking, from large enterprises to small businesses to individual creatives. And then there's a lot of implications for the creative industry as a whole, as there is with any disruptive productivity enhancing technology. So most of the AI that was available and still to this day is available on the market is trained by going out and scraping the web. Now, the courts are still working through figuring out what does that mean? What are the legal implications? But we do know that with a lot of, say, image generating models out there, you can go out and you can type in, make content in the style of name your favorite artist, and it will do that, right? And it becomes this sort of, this machine that can really mimic the style of individual artists. That doesn't sit well with a lot of people. Forget the legal issues, which is, like I said, still being decided, but that doesn't really sit well with a lot of our customers, again, from large companies down to individuals. So when we decided to engage and build our own models, from our image model to our design model, our vector model, any of the models that we have out there already and the ones to come, we knew that we had to build a model that, A, was trained only on known licensed content. So this is content where we know the provenance of every piece of content we train on. We know what the license of it, and we verified that this is licensed that we believe gives us the rights to train, where the creator has explicitly stated what the license of the content is. Number two, we put all sorts of protections and guards in the training data and also in the way you use our AI to basically prevent you from being able to use our models to mimic the style of known living artists or to mimic IP that is protected and owned under copyright law. So if you go and you type in, create an image in the style of your favorite artist in Firefly, it will not do that because it's never seen content by that artist. It doesn't know that artist's name, and so it just will fail at it. If you pick Mickey Mouse or whatever your favorite, pick your favorite IP out there, your favorite cartoon character or sneaker brand, and you say, create, a shoe for me like brand X, Firefly won't be able to do that, which, for some use cases, some consumer use cases might be kind of frustrating because you do want to create your favorite shoe. But for real commercial use cases, that's incredibly important because people don't want other IP working its way accidentally into their content, right? And there's, that's a legal risk for them. Not to mention that shoe company probably is happy that, other people aren't creating stuff using their brand as well. So these kinds of issues we're still working through them. What I can tell you is most of the creators out there who are doing real commercial work, like these are things they have to worry about, and they like having AI that is designed to be commercially safe.
Oh, it's great. And I've had the chance to talk to you in the past and understand, these efforts that you're doing and really validating the provenance of the data you're using. And I just don't think most people realize the amount of effort that it takes to do that. My world of chip design, we have to validate the provenance of our silicon, and we have, teams working on establishing that in processes, and we put tremendous effort in. I didn't understand that in your world until we had a chance to meet. It's very, very impressive, and so important for all of the creators out in the world. Eli, what I want to do is just sort of walk through a little bit about what does this change mean for all of us out there that are using content creation tools. I personally, I'm a geek. I love technology. That's where I spend my time. But of course, as a CTO, I need to create content. I need to articulate, my ideas and put them into visualization. But in the past, I've been, I will call it, by no means, that hardcore user. I'm usually, if I have to go several menus deep, I stop and it slows the creative process actually a bit. And so what I'd love to get some insight from you on is, you're a year in to now Firefly being out there. So now you're seeing users like me, really using generative AI. What does that tell you? How do you see adoption or barriers to adoption? And what do you see, like over the next 12 months in terms of rate of pickup of actually generative AI using this newfound, I'll say, collaborative interface between humans and computing?
Yeah. So what I'd say is, rewinding to our predictions from a year or two ago, no surprises in terms of how valuable it would be. Like, we could see from the beginning. In fact, I'll just tell you personally, I worked at Adobe for 20 years, left in 2017. I came back to Adobe 2 years ago when I saw some of the early research here that told me how disruptive and empowering it will be for the creative process. Like, it was just a really exciting time to be part of that and try and figure out how do we guide all these difficult issues that you're bringing up that would shape how we empower creators with this technology. The rate of adoption has been, I would say, a surprise. We released Firefly originally a year and a half ago. A little over a year ago, we got it into our tools. It showed up in Photoshop for the first time. And that was a pretty magical unlock for people. So, absolutely, like, I think one of the biggest unlocks that has happened over the past year and will continue to happen is about, how do we make the technology accessible to people? Creative pros, more casual creators like you and me, alike. It's about taking what is amazing raw technology and putting it into tools and putting it into real workflows so that it's actually accessible to people when they need it, where they need it. If you're a photographer, you may have heard the old statement that the best camera out there is the one you have on you, right? Which is sort of a comment about mobile cameras. And the idea that, you may have the most amazing DSLR, medium format, high resolution, multi-$1,000 camera out there. But if you're not holding it at the moment that you see a photo you want to take, it's useless. That one in your pocket is amazing. And the twist that he put it on it is the best AI is the one you have available in the workflow where you need it, which I think is absolutely right. But the adoption has been amazing. It's one of the most used features in Photoshop at this point. The way we see it adding value to people's workflows has been interesting, surprising, and really more inspiring, right? So for people like you and me, right, I put myself in the same bucket as you, it's an amazing enabler, right? I can create content with this technology that I couldn't create before. I had ideas. I knew what I wanted. I sort of had the creativity to imagine what will work. But the actual act of moving pixels around, I just don't have that technical skill. And so it's able to get me over the line to create content that I'm imagining that I just wouldn't have been able to technically accomplish in the past. Then there's our creative professionals, our higher-end creatives who, for them, they've always had the creativity, they've always had the skills, but it's just a matter of time, right? And the truth is, a lot of creativity, like most creative efforts, a lot of digital creativity, it's about iteration. Right? It's about that process of divergent thinking where you explore a bunch of ideas, and then convergent thinking where now that you've explored a bunch of ideas, you get a sense of where you're trying to get to, and then you have to iterate towards getting it very specific. And so for those creatives, the idea that the production work, the act of taking their idea and applying it, instead of taking hours to do it, now it takes minutes or seconds. And that just allows them to iterate quicker, which means they can just be much more effective in their overall creative process. And then the third one I'll say is, for some of the tasks that, it's not about the creative process, it's just about churning it out, right? It is now an effective assistant for being able to do things at scale. So a lot of our customers, they may have 100 hero assets that a creative pro made using our tools, or 5 hero assets, whatever, that they slaved over, lovingly created this gorgeous asset, and now they need it in 10 different aspect ratios at 5 different sizes, in 12 different languages, targeting 7 different customers in, 19 different colors, whatever it is. GenAI actually allows us to quickly go through that, and create far more variations than we would have been able to create before. I'm a big believer that at the end of the day, it really is about understanding what is creative work and what is rote production work, and getting the human capability focused on the creative piece, and using technology, as we have done for decades, to assist with the rote production piece. I can tell you, I've been using these generative creative technologies for longer than most people at this point, for a few years, and when we take a creative professional, some master, creator, whether they're, in our tools or elsewhere, and we put them in front of Firefly, In 5 minutes, they're creating far more interesting content than I can after 2 years of working with this stuff. Because at the end of the day, the creativity comes from what you do with it and what the human does. The computer is bringing, like I said, production, and it's able to follow your instructions and be a great assistant. But that creativity comes from the person.
Well, you hit on an aspect that I'd like to follow on, just take head on, because I think it is so important of that transformation of being able to leverage AI to attack that rote work and enable creativity. But not everyone sees it that way, right? I think it's easy to, if you're on the outside in and maybe you haven't experienced these tools and experienced what you just described, to say, hey, I don't like AI. I don't like where AI is going, because it's going to take jobs away, versus changing the way jobs are done in the way you were just described. And I'm sure you must hear that fear in your role. And how would you respond to that concern?
Yeah. So we hear that a lot. And yes, it will change jobs in ways that I think overall are going to be a net positive, but will be uncomfortable for people along the way. And I can tell you that the reason I work at Adobe, the reason most of my colleagues work in the digital media side of Adobe, is because we love building tools that help creatives, right? It's the mission of the company, creativity for all, and it is really the mission of everybody here at the company. If we weren't thinking about creatives first and worrying about, how will this benefit creatives, the first people at my door with pitchforks and torches would be the employees at Adobe. And yes, there's some amount of production work that is done by humans today that, not the creative piece, but the rote production stuff, that will get handed over to computers to do. And that is the reality of every productivity enhancing technology that's ever been created. It's an age-old story. My perspective is this technology is here and it's happening. And so our mission every day is, how do we make sure that we drive it in the direction that I just described? How do we make sure we drive it so that in a way that it is not destroying creativity, destroying originality, but enhancing the people who can bring that to the table so that they can continue to deliver amazing experiences. There's lots of amazing, beautiful stuff people make, but you need it in the hands of a creative who knows how to tell a story with it, who knows how to create meaningful content. That hasn't changed just because we have new tools to create it. And I think that will continue to be the case. And again, it's our mission and my mission to make sure that the people who are able to tell good stories are empowered by this stuff so they continue to rise above the noise rather than getting run over by it.
Yeah, you're empowering those customers, but you're doing it in a way, as you described earlier in this discussion, in a responsible way, and protecting creator rights, and that's so important. Eli, I want to go, not too surprising to you, I'm a technology enabler in what I do, so I'm a pivot a little bit to the technology side, and I'm actually going to pivot off of your comment that the camera you use is the camera in your pocket, in your hand, as you're going about. What we're doing at AMD, and as well as our competitors in the industry, is we're changing what has been the predominant form factor of content creation. It's the laptop sitting in front of us as we're working at our desk, or as we're at the local coffee shop, on their Wi-Fi and creating content. And we're adding AI acceleration, so extremely low power, does not impact your battery life. So we're actually growing the battery life of your working day, but adding, like we've added 50 TOPS of AI acceleration, right on top of that traditional CPU and GPU compute infrastructure. So it is a change of technology enablement that's in the midst. These kind of capabilities are rolling out they're in stores today, so it's upon us here. How do you think about that? Just like your camera analogy, as this technology now comes down right into that, laptop content creation tool and beyond. How do you think about that at Adobe?
I think we're at the first inflection point, and the transformations you're talking about are just at the beginning of really enabling a second one. So the first inflection point came from the availability of this technology. It's in the cloud, it's operating at scale. We could enable a whole bunch of things that we couldn't even conceive of before. But there's still a lot of limitations that constrain the use cases that we put it on, right? So First of all, are you connected? Right, that's a big one. And a lot of our customers are out working in the field. They're working in places, whether it's bad Wi-Fi at a laptop or they're, on location in a photo shoot. Connectivity is not a guarantee. The just availability, right? You guys know as well as the rest of us do that there's been a compute crunch, when it comes to GPUs and other accelerators in the cloud. That has not been broadly available and limits the amount that we could do in terms of training and inference of our models for our customers. And just the breadth of the use cases that we can put this in, driven by availability, driven by cost, driven by network latency, where the content is. If we want to do AI on an image, okay, we can round trip that image up to the cloud. If we want to do AI on a video, it's a much bigger deal to take a 40 gig video and round trip it to the cloud so that we can run a medium value model on the content for the user. Right? That's round tripping a 40 gig video means we got to start. It better be a really important use case. So I think that once you start bringing the capabilities that you guys are putting into the local machine, into the device, it just unlocks every one of those vectors that I just described for us to start to consider other use cases that today we'd look at and say, well, we can't do that right now because of X, Y, and Z.
And I think what's interesting is it's going to be a continuum. So where you have that round tripping of let's say large video files, if you have a high degree of that, you're going to need to be connected. You're going to be running hybrid. So part of that computation will be on the cloud. Where you can run it efficiently at the edge, so lower latency, faster, or right on that content creation device that's sitting in front of you. It's going to require a change of how we think about how products like you make at Adobe are deployed on those technology engines across that continuum. And that sort of leads me to the next topic, Eli, and that would be industry collaboration. Because with that type of new models of how we that work on the compute capability work with the application and capability providers like you're doing at Adobe, it means that we actually have to work together even more closely in the future. Right? We've got great experience working with you in the past. We've done things like taking advantage of multiple, parallel frame rendering and using all of the compute threads that we have, and as well as other, video and rasterization enhancements and things of that nature. But now there's like a whole new opportunity to collaborate. Could you comment on industry collaboration, whether it be, with individual companies providing, you're working with on technology or industry standards, just broadly, how do you see that changes in this AI-powered era?
Where we are right now, we're working closely with you to take our desktop software and our mobile software, mostly our desktop software that we've been doing this for years, to figure out, great, how do we take advantage of these new capabilities, and really how do we understand what's in the hardware and make sure that we are getting every last drop out we can get out of there for the use cases that we can put on these PCs today, while still leveraging the cloud for the bigger, badder use cases. But that collaboration we do will push the bounds of, these are typical use cases. These are ways that work and don't work. And we'll start to settle on established patterns. We'll start to settle on standards there that then can hopefully sediment into a stack that we can start to rely on. We can start to rely on even, as different vendors, whether we're on a different PC vendor or whoever, we don't have to deal with the complexity of every possible different client environment we're running in. And we'll just grow the set of use cases that can, again, take advantage of what we're doing on the client. And there'll always be, I think we're still years away from a place where we say, hey, we don't need to run stuff in the cloud because everything can be done on a local PC. But as you said, having the right partnerships that we can figure out the patterns for those hybrid workflows and build stacks and tools that enable that, that's going to be really important to help us continue to iterate, for the next, foreseeable future.
That's awesome, and we're so committed and excited about working with you and others in the industry on that enablement. And I think you mentioned standards, and it's so important. I mean, we're committed. If you look at our GPU stack, it's an open stack, and we're fully behind efforts like, of course, the coding at high-level languages like PyTorch or Triton, which is a non-vendor agnostic coding approach. So you can run on AMD or any of our competitors. We want to win on the merit of our products. But beyond that, I mean, you mentioned we're going to learn new bottlenecks as we develop this, applications running across the continuum of cloud to point devices. So I couldn't be more excited looking to that future and that kind of new collaboration, new areas of collaboration that we're going to have with you going forward, Eli.
Yeah, me too. It's been great so far. Obviously, our company's been working together for a long time, and it's exciting to have a whole new area to dive into, and again, sort of surprise ourselves with what we can unlock for customers.
Well, this is great. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the discussion today, and thank you for bringing this type of creativity acceleration for all of us out there. It's going to be incredibly exciting.
It is absolutely my pleasure to do it, both for our customers and with you guys. So thank you for having me on.
Awesome. Thank you, Eli. I truly enjoyed chatting with Eli. What I took away from our discussion is that Gen AI is accelerating the creative content generation, and the very processes themselves are changing as a result, and how these tools can be the magical unlock, as Eli put it, for creators. It's so vital that industry leaders like Adobe are thinking through how to support their customers ethically, legally, and creatively as we go through this holistic sea change. Thank you for joining us today on Advanced Insights. I look forward to bringing you more in-depth conversations on cutting-edge technology, industry insights, and visionary perspectives from some of the brightest minds in the field. Technology is always advancing, and I can't wait to share more insights with you next time.